Good evening, everyone. My name is Al Fritz, and I am an alcoholic. Stephen, thanks for the introduction. It's been a privilege to know you as well, and I wanted to start by thanking you for hosting the Sobriety Improvement Group, both Tuesday and Saturday evenings, as well as the Daily Ponderables, which reached many, many drunks every morning, including myself. And I'm privileged to be on that list. But thanks for all you do to carry the message. And to the men I sponsor that may be on this call or listen to this tape, I love you guys. And I appreciate you staying sober. And I appreciate you trudging this road of happy destiny together. It's a privilege. And to the men and the women that are in my two home groups, one is from Buffalo, New York, 7:30 men's meeting, and the Bethany Beach Early Birds meeting in Delaware. I love you guys as well. You're a big part of my sobriety, and especially a big part of my serenity. And where else can you go with a malady like we have that wants us dead from alcohol and wants to kill us and our relations with the ones we love? Where else can you go to find the love of one alcoholic to another that saves us from that pit of despair? And I found it right here, right now, with folks just like you all around the country and all around the world through Zoom. What a blessing Alcoholics Anonymous has been in my life. The theme for this share is out of despair, hope, and love. Make no mistake, as the big book says, when I first read that Alcoholics Anonymous was a design for living, I just kind of chuckled to myself and said, I just need to get my driver's license back, in the state of New York. I just need to get back into big bed. I need to keep my job. Little things like that were kind of going on in my life. In other words, I didn't get here on a winning streak. My scorecard, like the big book said, read 0. And out of that despair came hope and love, again, from one drunk to another. And I'm grateful for that today. I wanted to start out this morning. I got up and I had my daily meditation in the morning, and then it jumped on the 7:30 meeting. And, we hear from many alcoholics. It's amazing what we get out of these meetings if we're willing to be HOW, honest, open-minded, and willing. So in my daily meditation this morning, I prayed that God allow me to do a meaningful share this evening that would allow perhaps everybody participating in this call tonight to identify just one or two things that maybe you could pass on to another sick and suffering alcoholic, and put into your toolbox of spiritual principles that might help you carry this message to the next suffering alcoholic. That's my intention. And I prayed about it. So whatever God puts on my lips and heart and head tonight, you'll get to see the results of his work. But first thing I did was suit up and show up at the 7:30 men's meeting this morning. And what did we read? Page 110 out of As Bill Sees It book. For those who are new, there's a little compendium of literature. And I always in my shares try to tie some of my key thoughts back to the literature. And that's exactly what this 7:30 men's meeting does. It's literature based. And I found that to be really, really helpful in my recovery. But in today's reading, and I'm just going to paraphrase, it said, we found that our troubles could, under God's grace, be converted into unimagined blessings, end quote. So in other words, through my malady, I can help others under God's direction. And that's what I'm here to do tonight. And I appreciate the opportunity. Actually, I'm humbled to have the opportunity. I've heard a lot about this meeting. I've participated in this meeting a number of times. And at the end of this share, I want to spend most of my time talking about the solution. We talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. I want to spend most of my time on what it's like today and talk about the design for living and the love of one alcoholic to another, because it's powerful stuff, guys. It's powerful stuff. I came for my thinking. I came for my drinking, and I stayed for my thinking. That's what keeps me coming back. You know, when I first got here, nobody in Alcoholics Anonymous called me an alcoholic. They told me that's up for me to decide. It's a self-diagnosed disease, and to my own self be true. The other thing they promised me was that I would get better if I put my hand into the hand of this loving higher power and worked and lived to the best of my ability these 12 steps. They never promised me that life would get great. In fact, they said life still might be real difficult, especially based on the crazy consequences of your drinking. And but if you stay sober, you will get better. And in God's time, those other things might come back around. The job, the sleeping in the big bed, your driver's license, getting rid of the debt, you know, all the mess we create, self-imposed problems. So I want to start out by sharing what it was like. I grew up in a loving, dysfunctional, alcoholic family. And in that order, you know, when the booze wasn't flowing, it was a loving family. My older brother and I did not want for a thing. Our father was a hardworking enabler, and my mom was the alcoholic. And my mom was not one of those funny, happy-go-lucky drunks. She was one of those angry, resentful, destructive alcoholics. When booze went in, picture windows would be broken out of our house. Remember those swing line phones that mounted on the wall with the long telephone cords? They were the victim of mom's alcoholism on many a night. Mom would tear that swing line phone off the wall, and I was a kid of about 10 years old, and I'm watching this stuff, this crazy, dysfunctional behavior caused by alcohol. And you never knew where that swing line phone was going to end up. Some days it wound up out the, you know, crashing through the back picture window, or some days it was wrapped around somebody's head. But it was not a pleasant time in our family when the booze was flowing. And I share that not to share my mom's story, but to share the denial in my story was huge. Despite seeing the destruction, total destruction, almost total destruction of my mom's life, as well as the profound recovery in my mom's life through Alcoholics Anonymous, I became alcoholic. So when we say denial, it's not a river in Egypt. It's true. It's inside of us. I, as a kid, can remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to be that bad. I am not going to throw telephones through the front picture window of my home. Just not going to do it. And on the story went, you know, the examples of what mom did that I would never do. Well, mom's story was pretty difficult. Her recovery was miraculous. In April of 1972, God got her into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never saw that woman take another drink in her life. And our family became a true family unit from that time. But again, despite seeing the devastation of alcoholism and the recovery that's possible through Alcoholics Anonymous, I became alcoholic. And my disease of alcoholism was way worse than my mom's because I had to live mine. I didn't have to live hers. I had to live my hell. And I had to take my last drink for this program to work for me. I was the egomaniac with an inferiority complex, what it was like. I wanted to be the star of the show, but I felt less than, almost always. I have no idea where all those feelings and attitudes came from. They were just in there. It was kind of like ragu. It's in there. And it was part of the heredity, I guess, of alcoholism. That's a big part of my story. What it was like, my grandfather was alcoholic, my mom was alcoholic, and I'm alcoholic. My dad, no. My older brother, no. 50-50. It's just my older, uglier brother and myself. You'll find during this share that God's not done with me yet, guys. You know what I mean? So I keep coming back. But the older, ugly brother is not alcoholic, and I am. And I've heard around the rooms, you got an alcoholic parent, you got a 50-50 chance of getting this thing or having this thing. And I've passed on to both my boys that, the heredity's real strong in our family. When you take a drink, an alcoholic might be born. So be careful. And I know where you can go if you ever need help. And that's all I could do. And to this day, neither one of my boys, through the grace of God, has taken a drink of alcohol or become unmanageable because of it. And that's what makes me an alcoholic. I'm a 100 proofer. Didn't do any drugs. Beer damn near killed me. Could you imagine what cocaine linked up with the booze would have done? I mean, I'd have been absolutely dead for sure. I'm a first nighter. I hit my bottom, which I'm going to describe in a little bit, on September 3rd, 1989. And September 4, 1989 was my first sober day. I white knuckled it for 4 days after September 3. So September 7 was my first AA meeting. But since September 4, 1989, I have not found it necessary to take a drink or drug. Through the grace of God, the fellowship of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, great sponsorship that God put in my life all through my sobriety. And I have to share this too, what it was like. And I found this from a fella in Delaware. By the way, there's not much that I share that is original. It's all stolen from somebody. And I try to give credit when credit's due. So a fella in Delaware, he described my drinking really well. He said, there were many times in my drinking career where I refused the first drink. There was never a time where I refused the second drink. Once I took that first drink, that phenomenon of craving kicked in. And I've got a physical allergy with a mental obsession that has a spiritual solution in Alcoholics Anonymous. And let's see, I wanted to talk about my thinker being broke. The big book says, we have a disease that centers in the mind. I read that and I said, oh yeah, they've been reading my mail. My thinker was broke when it came to drinking. My off button was broke. I just couldn't stop once I started. And then when I wasn't started, I was obsessing about starting again and chasing that euphoric feeling, that early euphoric feeling that we get when we drink. I chased that for a long, long time in my drinking career. I got a big wanter is part of what it was like. See, I'm selfish and self-centered to the core. Again, the big book talks about that being the root cause of this disease, selfishness and self-centeredness. I read that and said, yep, I belong here. And, I got a big wanter. If I have one good car, I want two. I can't tell you how many TVs I got in my house. You know what I mean? It's just, it's out of control. My wanter is huge. So my sponsor suggested that I put that to good use, that I turn that malady into a positive attribute in my sobriety. So what he suggested, my very first sponsor, he said, why don't you get up in the morning and pray to God that your wanter, which is huge, stays wanting for the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. So every morning I start my day with what good old Paul Hain from Buffalo, New York suggested. Dear God, help my big wanter stay wanting for the principles of recovery. and give me the power to carry that out and to pass this message of hope on to others. But the bottom line in what it was like is the pain and the consequences of my drinking caught up to me. Pure and simple. If the pain and consequences of my drinking were not there, I'd still be drinking because I loved it. I just loved it. And I thought nobody knew. I'm just enjoying myself. If you had a tough job like I had, you'd drink too. If you had a wife like I had, hell, you'd drink too. If you had my family situation growing up, you would drink. And God knows I did. But the pain and the consequences are what earned me my chair in Alcoholics Anonymous. And today I can look back on that pain and say it was absolutely the gift of desperation from my higher power. I can look back on that pain and be grateful for that pain, because out of that pain came a beautiful way, a beautiful design for living. And I believe God caused that bottom to happen. What happened to me that got me into these rooms was on September 3, 1989. And I'm not proud of this, but it's my story. And the blessing is that as drunk as I was, I blew a 0.36 blood alcohol level. 0.5, they say we're dead. So I was pretty toasted. And I guess they said I was in a brownout. The lights were on, but nobody was home. You know what I mean? It was easier to drive a car than walk. So I drove. I mean, how stupid is that? But that's where I was. But on September 3, I left watching the strippers in Erie, Canada. Came across that's where my drinking took me. And I had a beautiful wife and a 1-year-old son in the crib at home. And here I am out celebrating the great I am. I closed a big deal at my work. And it was very positive for my organization. But I was out celebrating the great I am. Told you I was an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. So I'm over there and I'm coming out of the strippers at 3 a.m. I get to the toll taker at the Canadian border. And she noticed that I was, 20 sheets to the wind. She called ahead to the New York State Police over in America and said, you better get over here. We got a wet one here. And I'm afraid instead of driving across the Peace Bridge, he's going to drive over and right on into the falls. So sure enough, apparently, I know all this mostly from the police report. I'll share with you when I really figured out, oh boy, I'm in big trouble. So the police were behind me the whole way across the Peace Bridge. This is my description of my bottom. And the speed limit on that bridge at the time, I don't know what it is now, but it was 50 miles an hour. And the police report said I was going 13 miles an hour. 13 to 15 miles an hour, limping across this Peace Bridge. And no clue. The lights are flashing. There's a car on the side, lights flashing. In behind me, lights flashing. And I'm just driving Mr. Al across the Peace Bridge, not paying attention to nothing. I'm in that brownout they're talking about. Being able to semi-function. I get to the other side. Today, this is funny as hell for me. But at the time, let me tell you, it was like, oh, God. So I get to the other side. They got a roadblock set up, a police cars. All the lights are flashing. And that kind of snapped me out of my brownout. And I'm looking and I'm like, whoa, what the hell? Damn, they're after somebody big time. And they were after me. And I'm looking like to the sides of this roadblock to try to figure out how in the hell I can get around this thing because I'm an important guy. I got to get home and get some sleep. I got to get up at 6:30 in the morning. Unbelievable. So they did get me stopped with that roadblock, and the cop came up to my door, opened the door, and I literally fell out onto the pavement right there at the toll plaza at the Peace Bridge. The cop got me to my feet, took me through this sobriety checkpoint. All I can remember from that is the second time he asked me, could I say my ABCs? I couldn't say my ABCs. That's how drunk I was. And I remember vividly. Now, why I remember this detail, I don't know. Maybe I sang the ABCs to my 1-year-old son earlier that day or the night before. But I asked the cop, can you give me another chance? I know the ABCs. I just sang them to my son earlier in the day. And he said, sure, go ahead, knock your socks off, try it. So here I am in the middle of the Peace Bridge, the little grade school, chant, A, B, C, D, E. I'm trying to sing my ABCs to rhythm, and maybe that would cause it to come back. And it just didn't come out. It wasn't happening for me. That night, I could not remember my ABCs. That's how drunk I was. Anyway, I just went like this, crossed my hands, said to the cop, lock me up. I can't see, I can't walk the line, can't touch my nose, can't say, forget it. So he obliged. But in the back of that cop car, in handcuffs, I can remember vividly looking to the sky and from my guts saying to God, please, please help me. And I can't tell you how many, but a lot of drunks have told me over the years that their recovery started when they reached out and screamed out for help to their higher power. And I was raised religious, but I always had these jackpot prayers. If you do this, I won't do that. Or if you don't do this, I will do that type of thing. A jackpot prayer. Help me out on this one. And for the first time that I can remember with respect to my drinking, I did not have that jackpot prayer. It was really genuine from my guts. God, please, please help me. The next morning, I went in front of the judge, totally humiliated, embarrassed. The best way I can describe it is the hole in the soul. I was just bankrupt. I was done. And I knew I was done. I knew I just wrecked my career, or thought I did. God was merciful in that end. I thought my marriage was over just about anyway. I thought, well, I'm not going to drive for another 6 months. That's going to be the end of that. It was just when they were really starting to crack down on drinking and driving. And the other thing they just started to do in New York at the time was publish your name in the Buffalo News if you got locked up for DWI. And they would also, as my luck would have it, they would publish your blood alcohol level. Can you imagine? With all the HIPAA laws and all the privacy laws, didn't apply to that stuff. Well, needless to say, my board of directors for the job I held in Buffalo at the time did not appreciate a little bit that their CEO was in the second section of the Buffalo News for DWI. And damn near cost me my job. But, the big thing it got me was that gift of desperation. And I had the nudge from the judge. I had the board and my employer saying, look, one more incident of this and you're done. You are out. And they had all kind of conditions to that, like blood alcohol tests every twice a week, and so many days of outpatient rehab, 30 days of inpatient rehab, things like that, which today I look back on and I'm totally grateful for. I had a enlightened employer because, as we know, alcoholism has a stigma attached to it. So, and certainly did back then for sure. The stigma seems to be a little bit less these days, but who knows? In my case, there was a stigma, but I had a understanding board that gave me another shot. By the way, I retired, or not retired, but I left that job 4 years later on my terms, in good terms, with a good reputation. And pretty miraculous that was the case. But that was my bottom. That's what got me into the seats of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a ticket to 90 meetings of AA from the judge. And again, I look back on that. I'm grateful for that. So that was my bottom. My first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was at the St. John Marin Church in Williamsville, New York. My very first meeting, I walked in there. I went right from work. So I had a three-piece suit on at the time. This is kind of funny looking back on it. On my way there, now remember, my scorecard's reading 0. I'm not hitting the rooms on a winning streak. I got the judge all over me, my lawyers stealing my money. Well, at least I thought they were. The insurance company stealing my money. You know, my insurance rates went crazy after the DWI. Anyway, I'm not getting there on a winning streak, and I'm going to this meeting in a three-piece suit thinking to myself, what's a good guy like me needing to go to a room like this? I mean, this is crazy. These people are certainly, you know, not as debonair as I am. There's that ego again. So I pull up to this meeting, and there's a bunch of people outside smoking cigarettes. I got out, walked up there. They stuck out their hand. They said, welcome. Come on in. Let us get you a cup of coffee. And you know, those good drunks in Buffalo, they knew to fill up my cup just to halfway full, because they knew I had the shakes, the blotchiness, you know, the sweats. This is 4 days without a drink. And I'm still, you know, pretty tightly wrapped. I get into this meeting, and this is my story, and I'm sticking with it. They broke into small groups in Buffalo. And do you know those good people knew to sit me at the beginner's table? Not the step table, not the big book table, not the 12 and 12 table or the discussion table, at the beginner's meeting. And at that beginner's meeting, the fella that chaired that meeting became my first sponsor. I look back on that, and that's definitely God working in my life. And Paul Hain was the first sponsor that I had, and I had him for the first 4 years of sobriety. That man put my hand into a loving God's hand, not a scorekeeping God's hand. And he put my nose into that big book, and he showed me gratitude. He asked me and suggested that I do a gratitude list. He suggested I write out my bottom, because if I don't remember my bottom, I'm doomed to repeat it. Things like that. He told me that I get a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And he emphasized maintenance. Just like with your car, you got to change the oil, put air in tires, make sure your battery's good, things like that. Same with Alcoholics Anonymous, same with my sobriety. I got to do the maintenance. He told me to write things down like go to meetings, pray like my life depends on it. Don't take that first drink. It's the first drink that gets me drunk. And I'd hear things like that, and I'd say, these guys are lightweights. They are absolute lightweights. It was the 14th Michelob that got me drunk. It was not the first. And he said, no. And he'd have to explain it to me. I just, I didn't know what I didn't know. And he'd explain, if you don't take the first one, you're not going to take the third, the fifth, the ninth. Just got to stay away from that first drink a day at a time, sometimes a minute at a time. And here's what we do to do that. Because I'd ask him, well, how in the hell do I do that? This urge to drink is powerful. And he said, you get numbers, phone numbers, and you wear out that phone. Every time you get a thought to drink, you tell on yourself. You pick up that 1,000-pound receiver. Cell phones were just coming out. We had a big car phone in my car, with a battery in the back and all that hooey. He said, you pick up that 1,000-pound phone and you scream out for help to another alcoholic who can talk you down off that ledge, who can pray with you, who can get your butt to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what? I wanted this thing. I wanted sobriety. I wanted it bad. There's many who need this program, but the ones who make it are the ones that want it. And where that want came from, the pain and consequences of my drinking. That's why I'm grateful for that today. What it's like today, from that good sponsorship, flowered a relationship with the 12 steps. And I have 4 love stories to share here before the end of the meeting. The first love story is great sponsorship. And I want to share with you just a little prayer that it came upon in the 12-step prayer book. It's not AA approved literature. Don't write into central office and blow me in here. But it's been powerful, this little prayer book. And it's entitled Love Is. And when I read this, I'd like you to think about your sponsor. Think about your sponsees, and how are we showing love? How are we receiving and showing our gratitude to our sponsors for their love and support and direction and suggestions and putting up with my whining, Take a listen to this. Love is friendship that has caught fire. It is quiet understanding, mutual confidence, sharing, and forgiving. Love is loyalty through good times and bad. Love settles for less than perfection. It makes allowances for human weaknesses. Love is content with the present. It hopes for the future, and it doesn't brood over the past. It's the day in and day out chronicle of irritations, problems, compromises, small disappointments, big victories, and common goals. If you have love in your life, it can make up for a great many things you lack. If you don't have love, no matter what else there is, it's not enough. Initially, the love of my sponsor carried me through until I could begin to love myself. That's my first love story. I had the privilege of being called back to Buffalo, New York. I moved from Buffalo in 1993, back to Maryland, my home state at the time. And I got the call that Paul was very sick, and I got to go back and visit with him in the assisted living facility. And it was just absolutely terrific. I can remember being able to say thank you to that man for saving my life. And all I can remember is one big tear coming out from Paul's eye. And he looked up at me and he said, "Al, you wanted this thing. You wanted sobriety. And it wasn't me." And he just went like this. He pointed up to the heavens. It was God working in your life and my life. Thank you for your love and support. And I got to hug that man and just spend good time with him for 4 hours. 2 days later, he died. There's the love of one alcoholic to another. Pass it on. Pass it on. It's not all about these words. It's about the love of one drunk helping another drunk stay sober a day at a time. Second love story in Alcoholics Anonymous, because this is the way it is today for me. When we share what it's like, what happened, and what it's like today, it's the love. I can be a husband today that genuinely cares and loves my wife, genuinely, with no strings attached. I can be a better father today, a better uncle, a better brother. I was a better kid, better child to my parents, help them lead this world in dignity and honor. I'll tell my mom's story in a minute. She's the third love story. But here's one. This comes from mom too. This is love story number 2. It's the little black 24-hour day book. You can see it's well torn, and in fact, it comes apart. It's so used. But it was a gift from my mom. And in the back, this is the mom that used to throw the phones through the picture windows. In the back, she's got a little handwritten cursive note, and I'm going to read it to you. Beautiful cursive. Mom passed away in 2004, sober, in dignity and honor, and I was there by her bedside. But this is when she gave me this book. She was 17 years sober when I got into Alcoholics Anonymous. To my loving son, if you remember to place him with a capital H first, all other persons, places, and things will fall into place in God's time. Love always, Mom. Mom was sober when she died, 32 years. This September 4, I celebrated 32 years of sobriety. We got a chance, if we stay sober, to break this chain of destruction from alcoholism. Pass it on to those we sponsor. Pass it on to those we sponsor. Love story number 3. This came from my third sponsor. It comes from Al-Anon. His wife was in Al-Anon 17 years. My current sponsor. She was in Al-Anon for 17 years before her husband came into AA. That's how sick he was. God bless him. And Scotty Wilbur, who's my sponsor today, he said, Al, I suggest we steal this literature from Al-Anon and we use it every day. The Just for Today prayer. If you haven't seen it, get a hold of it. It's tremendous. But again, the love of one alcoholic to another to share the tools of recovery. That's the message. That's what we do. We don't make this stuff up as we go. Through the grace of God, Bill and Bob put it in writing in 39, and it's sold all over the world, the big book. We got the 12 and 12. We got the Drop the Rock. We got the literature out, the yin yang. Use it to carry the message, even from other programs. And I know this is AA, and out of respect for AA, we're keeping this thing AA, but use whatever's at your disposal with yourself and your sponsees to pass this message along. For me, this is powerful. It's a big part of my daily meditation. I know a lot of drunks that use it as well. The last story is probably the most recent and the most profound, and it impacts a number of you in this room. Stu Klayman. We can use Stu's last name because he's now in the big meeting in the sky. Stu C. loved this meeting. And he was one of the guys that helped Stephen Todd sign people in and, keep track of who's where and all that good stuff. And you might remember him. He'd always be chewing on a piece of licorice. He'd always have his little black hat on, or I don't know, just his big smile, his contagious smile. Well, the Design for Living came alive in Stu and Ours relationship. I had the privilege of being Stu's sponsor since 2017, when he first came in all busted up. And his story was much like many of ours, scorecard that read 0, but really somehow, some way, desperately wanted to stay sober and to get sober and stay sober. And that man worked those steps hard. I mean, he really did, thoroughly and hard. And I mean, we'd have long, long discussions. Beautiful man. We'd pray together every morning on that phone. We'd use those daily ponderables every day, Stephen. Keep up the good work. That works, man. It works. We'd use that every day, to just kick it around, pick it apart. Nah, I don't know about this. And it was just a beautiful spiritual discussion that Stu and I would have. Well, flip ahead to his ailments. He had many of them besides alcoholism, physical, clinical ailments. And it got to the point where hospitalization was needed. And we were trying all kind of avenues to deal with his back pain and get him some spine surgery and things like that. But God had other plans. They say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Well, God wanted Stu to be removed from all that pain and suffering is the bottom line. But what I want to share is the Design for Living. So April 2017 shows up to my home group, Chiquita Bananas here in Cape Coral, Florida, Stu C. And a couple weeks later, he asked me to be a sponsor. We got right into the steps. From there on out, there wasn't a day he show up with his car without somebody or one or two other men being in that car, because he picked them up right from work, pick them up, get them to something to eat and drink, and get them to an AA meeting. I can't remember when I'd see his car pulling in when it was just Stu by himself. Service, talk about service. He taught me a couple things in my sobriety. The healing starts when the blaming stops. We've heard that quote around the rooms. This man lived that. Never once did I hear him utter a bad word about anybody who wronged him, especially certain family members who just dearly hurt him. And he tried to make amends, and that wasn't possible in some cases. But I'd say, Stu, you're not a doormat. Speak up for yourself. And he'd say, Al, the healing starts when the blaming stops. And I have to be cognizant of my role in what's happening in my life. And that was the second major thing he taught me. He taught me so many things, but those were the two major things. And I know you all remember Stu fondly as well, but 3 days before he died in the hospital, there was a good bit of confusion about the course of clinical action to take. And his family left me with Stu in the room, just he and I, and they knew how close we were. They could see the love. Again, one drunk to another. Not trying to play doctor, not trying to solve the whole dilemma here, but just trying to be a loving member of Alcoholics Anonymous and help another sick and suffering drunk get through this thing called life. And Stu pulled me up close to him and he looked me in the eye and he grabbed my hand and he said, "Can you please tell me the truth about what's going on clinically with me?" And I said, "Sure, you know I will, to the best of my ability." So I told him all the maladies that are going on clinically, best I could describe them. And it was not good news. But he asked for the truth. We give each other the truth in these rooms. And we're only as sick as our secrets. We all know that. And then he pulled me even closer. I mean, we were like, I don't know, 6 inches apart. And he said, "What should I do? What should I do?" In other words, should I live, try to live, or is it time to call it quits? And I don't know if anybody's ever experienced that. One man asking another man or woman, what should they do with respect to their life? And, we say all the time in AA, we don't tell people what to do. We just give suggestions. The power of Alcoholics Anonymous is real. It is a design for living. Because what came to my feeble mind when that man looked me in the eye and said, "What should I do?" I said, "Stu, you already have the answer. It's step 11. You got to pray like your life is on the line here, because obviously it is. Pray for God's will, and whatever he puts on your heart, ask him for the power to carry that out." It's straight step 11 stuff here. That's what's needed right here, right now. And we all talk about the slogans and we say, "Live and let live." Now's the time, is what I said to him. Now is the time to live this thing. Follow what God puts on your heart and have the courage to carry it out. An hour later, he called his sister Maxine into the room. I think Maxine might even be on this call tonight, but called Maxine in and said, let's take a look at hospice. And 3 days later, he died in dignity and honor. There's the design for living right there. Right then, at the moment of most need, this program meets us at any level, at any time, if we simply ask this higher power for the help and the guidance. And that's what I'm here to share tonight, guys. It's a beautiful design for living. It gets us to love when we were tearing ourselves up, when we were consuming that great eraser alcohol that erases marriages, relationships with our kids. The benefits of what it's like today are beyond my wildest dreams. And I got here by walking on the shoulders of the giants who preceded me. And my guess is you the same. So keep coming back, guys. Keep praying like our lives depend on it, because it does. Keep hitting the meetings. Thank you for Sobriety Improvement Group for being here. And I want to thank my higher power, because whatever came out, he put on my mind and my heart. And it's the language of the heart tonight, I hope, for many of you. And pass it on, guys. Thank you. God bless you.